Welcome to the Wise and Happy Life podcast, where ancient wisdom meets modern science, and mindfulness, philosophy, and happiness practices blend with neuroscience, compassion, and common sense. Hosted by Bob Martin, meditation mentor, happiness coach, trial lawyer, and entrepreneur. This podcast explores how to live with grace, presence, and purpose in a complex world.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of A Wise and Happy Life, and we're here with Jason Lang. We've been talking about men's issues, and we're going to go forward now with part two because there's so much more. We've only started to scratch the surface. Jason, where were we? How did we end up last time?
Yeah, and a lot of that then, like I said, what's under discussed and what I do find in men I work with is they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe in relationship. They don't feel safe to presence their sexuality. So it just all starts to kind of ball together to create a lot of changes or challenges relationally right now. And then we couple that, like we said, with a lot of women are more educated than men these days. More and more, I see couple dynamics shifting in that the woman makes more money than the man. In all these ways, we were kind of programmed of what a successful man is supposed to be. You know, I provide and provision for my family, and if I do that, that's enough. It doesn't work anymore. It's not enough anymore.
I've actually heard some men say that they're express worry that their wives are going to start making more money than they do, and they perceive that their position in the family is going to be subjugated.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, and it's a real fear. I personally can't wrap my head around that. I have a wonderful relationship with my wife, and if she makes more than I do, God bless, more for all of us. But I grew up in a different environment, I grew up in a carnival, so it was just different. But yeah, that money thing is an issue. Yes.
Yeah, it's a thing, and it is shifting. And again, it's not actually a problem. I think I'm with you. I'm like, great, you're making more money, fantastic, good for you. The shift then has to be the identity of men and reformatting and going at it in a deeper sense of then most men I know, we want to provide, we want to feel useful, we want to feel helpful and have an impact. And the place I again tend to take men in men's work in men's groups is learning, okay, well, if your partner's making more money than you, what can you provide? And guess what? It's not finance. It's deep presence, which sounds like this woo-woo thing, but it is actually one of the great gifts of the masculine part of any of us. And that is something we can actually cultivate and train our nervous systems to do, because in a sense, I have a very powerful wife. My wife has an incredibly fierce, masculine, and Harvard business trained, and can go out into the corporate world and kick ass in a large sense. And we're parents of two, which despite what people think, a lot of parenting is actually holding structure for your kids. It's often quite masculine in a sense. So one of the interesting things is, at the end of the day, it's even more valuable for her if I can take the reins, right? And allow her to not have to be planning things, to not be holding the structure of the moment because she just works so hard all day at work or with the kids or whatever that might be. And there's these things we can actually train ourselves to do as men that become incredibly valuable in our families and in our relationships. But it's a different skill set that, again, we weren't taught. So we just need training to do that. And once we learn those things, what I've seen in men whose relationships I've supported them in, the money thing is just a non-starter. It does not matter because there's a way to re-energize that part of the relationship that's independent of finance. And then once that's energized, it's like, oh yeah, go out and make as much money as you can. You're awesome at that. I support you in that. I totally celebrate you in that. And for a lot of women, that's deeply meaningful to feel that. And then these very same capacities I talked about, as we develop them in ourselves as men, often cause us to end up making more money, to be trusted, to take bigger responsibilities at work or whatever we might want. So again, the thing I just point to is, in the so-called gender wars, it's not that one side has it easier than others. There's challenges on both, and both sides are being asked to grow into more complexity right now. And men are a little behind the curve, I would say, and just we haven't been given the roadmap. And for a lot of young boys in particular, to kind of tie it back, there's been a vacuum of modeling of what healthy, evolved masculinity looks like. And in that vacuum, we kind of have these regressive voices stepping forward that try to assert that, oh, we can do the 1950s again, right? We just have to will it back into existence. And
Make
those kind of
America great
simpler,
again.
yeah, those kind of idealistic, simplified answers, they hit a yearning, I think, in all of us for simpler times. But it's not possible, right? We live in a more complex world now.
Mhm.
Now, maybe you find a partner who's into that kind of traditional relationship, great. But most men I know, the types of women they're attracted to, they don't want that. They want a man who can be both highly on purpose in life and highly relational and attuned to himself, to their partner, etc. And so there's a skill building that, my argument is we can do a lot of that skill building in a good men's circle, in men's group.
So I do a lot of work around generational trauma
Mm-hmm.
in meditation and in mentoring and my happiness work. But as you keep saying, we weren't trained, we weren't taught, we weren't this. It almost begins to sound like generational masculinity that's passed down from
Totally.
generation to generation. And so, what, as a father, okay, I'm looking at my kid and I'm seeing my son. I'm being hypothetical here because my children are grown. My boy's 40. But in my young son, my young child, my young daughter, I'm beginning to see them express some of these generational myths about who they are.
Mm.
And I know that has to be coming from the parenting. I mean, we are the closest and most prolific teachers that they experience. So what do I notice, and what can I do about it?
Yeah. What are you noticing? I'm curious. Well, like, what are they coming back at you with?
Well, I don't. I mean, I'm not talking about my kids. That
Oh, gotcha. Sure.
I'm just saying
Yeah.
hypothetically.
Uh-huh.
My son
Gotcha.
criticize his sister. Oh, you're
Yeah.
just a girl.
Hmm.
I start to see those things popping up. I realize that it's got to be coming from me and the parents. How can we begin to become more educated about our own gender myths? And that kind of brings up a
Yeah.
whole other thing. A lot of the whole MAGA movement and other political movements uh, are decrying wokeness. And this conversation that we're having, if heard by some of those folks, would say, oh, that's just another woke conversation. But it's not,
Hmm.
it's real. But there comes a point where things do become a little bit out of balance, even in this direction. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with this, but
Yeah. Well,
how do you?
there's a couple of
I
things.
guess the question is, how do you defend against the label of being woke when you're talking about these kinds of gender myths and getting real about gender without trying to say that gender is a myth?
Yeah, sure. I acknowledge that there are differences between male and female bodies, and there's a whole spectrum of being that is, again, a challenge for our culture right now because things aren't as simple as you were born in this type of body, so you're going to be like this in life. We're being liberated from that, and that's a great thing. That is a
Hmm.
great thing in my mind. But like I said, it's more complexity. So people don't know how to deal with it. Oh my God, what does it mean? Da 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 da. And one thing I've become really clear about, and I've been talking about in the last couple of months which maybe is one of the excesses of woke, is it doesn't really do anyone any good to rank pain. So when we start ranking our pain against someone else's pain, both people end up suffering. And instead, there's just an acknowledgement of we're all humans. Some of us have more challenges in certain areas than other areas, but everybody experiences some kind of pain, and everybody sometimes has something to be confronted with, something they don't know how to deal with. And just that, right, is men's work is not at the expense of women, right? I don't want to help men get more connected to themselves to keep women down. I want all boats to rise. And where I see in the culture right now, one of the greatest leverage points is around men and their pain. That if, right, again, this is my own version of this, but a lot of the nastiest stuff happening in the world tends to come from men disconnected from their hearts and disconnected from the impact of their actions, whether that's on people, whether that's on the environment, you name it. That's something that often happens a little bit more on the masculine side. So to me, one of the greatest points of leverage is to work with that. And getting men into men's groups, I think, is a big part of that in a sense. And I'm a big believer in cultural evolution, right? I studied with Ken Wilber and lots of people who have, gone through developmental psychology. And at the cultural level, there's certain values we move through. And guess what? Everyone is in a response to the one before. So a cultural wave comes forward. Guess what? It has excesses, it causes damage. So the next one evolves to correct those, and the pendulum swings to the other side. But then that causes new problems. So something else has to come, and the pendulum swings back and forth. And we just kind of rather inefficiently sometimes kind of start to work our way through it. And we're there right now with the so-called woke stuff. A lot of it is very necessary and very true. And it's great to point out all the power hierarchies and differentials in our culture. And we then still have to do something about it. When people are in pain, how do we help them? And just because I'm in pain doesn't mean I can discount your pain. And I think that's part of what we're maybe emerging from right now.
Yeah.
And then
that reminds me of, at one point I was 320 pounds and I was seeing a therapist, and I kept asking the therapist, I said, I think that there seems to be this black box down in my past. Like I can't remember what happened to me before 6. And if I could only get through this subconscious block, to find out what traumatized me to cause me blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me and he giggled once and he says, Bob, all that's really fine and good. And you really may break through and find that, but you're still going to have to go on a diet. And just like you say, there are all of these things that we have to recognize, and perceptions and concepts and philosophies that are out there, but we may recognize all of that, but it still means that we have to do something about it and that there's work to be done. I have a question for you, because I am I guess I identify as a Taoist Buddhist Christian, spiritually. But my first introduction to any kind of system of virtue was Taoism. Taoism is based on yin and yang energy. And from a Taoist perspective, all of this is simply explained by the balance of yin and yang energy within us, and that we have both energies within us, and that a man that doesn't have any yin energy would have a great deal of difficulty relating to a woman. If you don't have any energy to relate with, anything that you can feel, that you can wrap your head around. And so we're a combination of it. And some of us are a little more yang, some of us are a little more yin. Men tend to be, again, not individually, but tend to be a little bit more yang. Women tend to be a little bit more yin. If you're excessively yang, then you have fangs and you're dripping blood and you want to kill. If you're excessively yin, you're scattered and can't get anything done. So you need both of those energies, the healing energy and the aggressive energy, the I got to do it, the punching through energy, as well as the bring the weakest along energy. Those energies have to be within us if we're going to be balanced. Does all of that kind of Taoist thinking map on with the people that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So a big part of my training was in this world of um, what we call polarity, of
Hmm.
discovering what does energize an intimate relationship. And what's interesting about it, as we have been liberated from just because I was born in a male body, I have to be this, just because I was born in a female body, I have to be this, is it's really about the art of difference, right? We talk about this in terms of magnets, right? When you imagine a magnet, if you have a positive side and a negative side, it creates a field of attraction. If you
Hmm.
have two of the same, they actually repel each other. And where a lot of modern relationships are challenged is they're depolarized, or they have a reverse polarity that's not being consciously used. And so we all have inner yin, inner yang. You call it masculine, feminine. People call it alpha and omega, feeling and perspective, go and flow. There's just an infinite variety of ways to describe that polarity. And a big part of what I would say is the new currency for us men in particular is our capacity for fluidity, meaning when it's a moment where I need yang energy, I can go there and do that. And it can't always be that.
Hmm.
Sometimes there's a moment to be in my yin to restore. And so many men come to me in their 40s and 50s completely, completely burnt out, having been grinding their bodies for years. And what I actually need to teach them to do is to slow down and take care of yourself
Hmm.
and restore and get relational and have that season of restoration, which doesn't have to be forever, right? But again, these two things work together. And the more men can take responsibility for our inner yin state, our emotional states,
Hmm.
our well being, again, the more effective and trustable we can show up as
Sure.
leaders in the world. And
Sure.
that's part of what we're being asked to do right now, just like 50, 60 years ago, women were suddenly asked to, hey, develop a yang, get out there, have a
Hmm.
career, achieve
Hmm.
something, be your own person. And they've done that very well. And
Hmm.
us men are now doing our part. And the whole point is, once we've kind of developed both of these inner capacities, we can meet a partner in intimacy and figure out what's needed in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes my wife is better at leading than I am
Right.
around certain things. It would be stupid for me to pretend like I should be in the lead because she's
Oh yeah.
smarter around this thing. She has more acumen around something. And there's other times where I take the lead. And it's
Hmm.
that fluidity that I think is being called for right now, that we
Right.
have the
Right.
capacity to do either. And that's another area that I then see underdeveloped in men is being so afraid of being kind of the hyper macho man. They're totally afraid to take the lead, to be decisive with anything. And so women go out on a date with them and they're not even sure it's a date. Do you want to hang out? Like, men don't have that capacity to come
Uh-huh.
forward and take the lead for the sake of
Yeah.
creating
Yeah. Yeah.
connection and intimacy. So they have to develop that too. And we're all being asked to become more complex in
More
these sense.
complex.
And
It reminds
to me,
me of
that's not a
a
problem.
Yeah, it reminds me of a term from transactional analysis. We'll call the winning formula. And the winning formula could evolve and devolve, actually, would be the word, into you're becoming a one trick pony. So you have
Yeah.
a winning formula. My winning formula is to be aggressive. There, we can think of
Yes.
certain politicians that they are what you can see the example. They're one trick ponies, and they have a set way of reacting to everything. This is what worked for them at some point in their life, and it just continues to work. It's what they were taught to do, trained to do, what they learned to do, and they never learned the complexity that you're talking about, the
Yeah.
ability to look at a different way of looking at it. And the problem, of course, with that is that, and again, going back to Taoism, the whole, when you watch people practicing Tai Chi, they're actually embodying the yin and the yang. There are times to move forward, and there are times to fall back and times to move forward. And if you've ever seen anybody doing push hands, which is an advanced form of Tai Chi, you're actually connecting with another person's energy and moving forward and responding and acting and responding to that energy in a very, very complex, very embodied and very aware way. And my just to kind of like talk about the complexity of it, my teacher, watching me, 72nd generation grandmaster from the Shaolin Temple, we once asked him how what you need to do to become masterful in life. And he says, oh, it's very easy. There's only three things that you need to do. One, you need to be completely aware of all of the energies that are working within you. And then you need to be completely aware of all of the energies that are working within the other. And then you need to become completely aware of all of the energies that are working in the environment around you. And then simply, withdraw all of the boundaries between the three spheres. I'm
That's
still
great.
working. I'm still working on that one. I'm still working on that one.
Yeah, that's
But
so potent.
the complexity of matching energy to the situation that you're in really does require an open heart and an open mind and a willingness, to allow things that may seem a little bit uncomfortable and to experiment with them and have a mind full of curiosity and willingness. And those are all things that, we need to know the answer. So we were taught we need to know the answers. It's hard for us to say, I don't know. Uh, but the problem with knowing all the answers is that there's no potential. There's no possibility. There's no opportunity for a miracle to happen in your life when you know all the answers, because you already know all the answers. And it becomes, I'm always looking at what makes us happy. And if you look at people that know all the answers, that are one trick ponies, that, have a winning formula and are motivated by power and wanting and aversion and not wanting and the like, they're just not happy people. And if you look at people that are in touch and have that fluidity that you were talking about, they're happy. And, so what all of this work really comes down to, I mean, in the final analysis, I think, is just be happy. It just so happens coincidentally that the path to happiness comes in that fluidity and complexity. Oliver Wendell Holmes had a great quote. He said, I wouldn't give you a fig for the simplicity on this side of complexity, but I'd give my right arm for the simplicity on the other side of complexity. And I always think of the Dalai Lama once, he said, what my religion is in my temple is in my heart. It's a simple statement, but what he went through and the training that he went through to get to that simple statement was something else. And somebody that says it that hasn't gone through, that complexity and that openness and that willingness to learn, that person, may see things as simple, but that simple is not helpful. That kind of simplicity is not helpful. The ignorant simplicity. We have to be willing to go through the fire, to get to the other side. So, Jason, I think that we're getting close on time now. This has just been a wonderful conversation. I've learned so much from you. And I think what I have learned the most is, and that I find myself even a bit surprised of the little biases that were floating around in my brain about what's going on with men today. And you have opened up a lot of thinking and thought for me. I'm sure you've done the same for the audience. It's been just an absolute delight to have you here. And I'm hoping maybe we can do this again.
I would absolutely love to. I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
Barely scratched the surface. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave folks with?
Yeah, just, I'll speak to the men out there and say, the days of doing it alone are just over, right? What I've seen in my own life, and now hundreds of men I've supported getting connected to other men in men's groups and men's circles and men's retreats is it's not that life necessarily gets easier, but it gets a whole lot better when you have a team of men in your corner. And it allows us to take more risks and challenges because we have somewhere to land when inevitably things don't work out how we want. And a good men's group is going to be that balance, like we talked about, of two things: support when you're down, when you've been knocked down, whether that's from an interpersonal relationship, a way you let yourself down, or something happening in the culture of the world. There's men who can quite literally, I don't even mean this just metaphorically, hold you. Every man needs that in life. And to all the macho pushback I get, I say, I don't care how tough of a guy you think you are, every man in his life will reach a moment where he can't just push through. Your body will fail you. Old age, sickness, it's coming for us all. And at that point, you're going to fall back to what kind of communal resources do I have alongside me? So we need that. And we need the other side a group can give as well, which is to hold us accountable to move towards the life we most want to move towards. And that sometimes it does mean, yeah, you got to get on the diet and you got to stick with it because that's in deeper service of the vision of who you are and how you want to impact the world. And a good group can help you dial that in as well. And all of that said, it also just gets a lot more fun. It just gets a lot more fun being able to share our wins, share our losses, and do it together as men and feel like, wow, I finally got some guys on my team. I don't have to figure this out all alone. And just that alone, I've seen completely shift so many men's lives.
Yeah, we don't have to make life as hard as we tend to. Jason, if there's a man out there that wants to know more about it, where can he go? How can he find you?
Yeah, just head over to evolutionary.men, so not .com, but .men, and you can see all kinds of stuff I have about men's groups, men's work, growth, evolution, all of that stuff, if any of this tickled your fancy.
Okay, so that'll be in the show notes. Jason, I appreciate you. I thank you. And I honor your work.
Thanks so much, Bob. Thanks for creating a space like this.
Yes, sir.